In every community, there are stories that remain hidden, tucked away in the corners of family homes or whispered over cups of tea. But some secrets are too powerful to stay hidden for long. Ajoke, a woman from a quiet village, held the key to a recipe so unique that it had the power to change lives. No one knew it, not even her closest friends or family members, until the day everything changed. What happens when the world discovers Ajoke's secret recipe? Brace yourself for a tale of magic, mystery, and the unshakable bond between culture, food, and destiny. In the heart of the African savanna, nestled within a vibrant and close-knit village, lived Ajoke, a woman whose culinary skills were as revered as the wisdom passed down through generations. The village was full of life, where the golden sun met the earth, and the winds carried the sweet smell of freshly cooked meals through the air. Ajoke had been known for many things, but above all, she was known for her extraordinary cooking, a gift that had been passed down to her by her grandmother. She had inherited more than just a knack for blending spices and creating rich flavors. She had inherited a secret recipe that had been handed down for centuries. The recipe was not just any recipe. It wasn't a dish you could simply read in a cookbook and recreate. It was a part of Ajoke's heritage, a deeply personal and sacred tradition, and it held within it a power that no one quite understood, except for Ajoke and the generations before her. The dish, when prepared correctly, was said to bring about profound emotional healing, peace, and even life-changing transformations. The people who tasted it felt a connection to something greater than themselves, something ancient and powerful. Ajoke's grandmother had always told her that the recipe was a gift, but it came with a responsibility. Only those who truly respected it, understood its origins, and embraced its magic could truly benefit from it. For years, Ajoke kept the secret close to her chest, knowing the dangers that came with sharing it. Her grandmother had cautioned her time and time again that there were things that should never be revealed, and this was one of them. It wasn't just about the ingredients, it was about the intention, the heart, and the energy that went into creating the dish. Without these elements, the recipe was just a collection of flavors. But when made with love, it held the ability to heal, to transform, and to create a deep sense of connection to the spirit of the land and the ancestors. Ajoke's life was peaceful, and her culinary skills were well known throughout the village. People came from far and wide to sample her food, and while she graciously shared her other recipes, this particular dish remained her most closely guarded secret. She would smile knowingly whenever someone complimented her, but her heart remained firm, unwilling to share the recipe that had become her legacy. Despite the secrecy surrounding it, Ajoke couldn't help but notice how her dish had affected the people who tasted it. There was always a spark in their eyes after they had enjoyed her cooking, as though something had shifted inside them. Some came back repeatedly, drawn to the comfort and peace that came from the meal. Others would come to her with stories of how their lives had changed after eating her food. A man who had struggled to find work for years had finally received a job offer, a couple who had been estranged from each other found reconciliation, and a woman who had been grieving the loss of her child found a deep sense of peace. Ajoke always felt a deep sense of pride in knowing that she had created such an impact on people's lives. Yet, she couldn't shake the fear that the recipe could be misused if it ever fell into the wrong hands. She had seen how people had become obsessed with things they didn't fully understand, whether it was wealth, power, or fame, and she knew that this recipe, with its incredible power, could be twisted for selfish purposes. As the years went by, Ajoke grew more resolute in her decision to keep the recipe to herself. She found joy in seeing the happiness her food brought to people, but she remained cautious. It wasn't that she didn't want to share her gift, it was that she wanted it to remain sacred, untouched by greed or manipulation. Ajoke's belief was that the recipe wasn't meant for just anyone. It was for those who were willing to approach it with reverence, for those who saw food not just as a means of survival, but as a way to connect with something deeper. One evening, as the village gathered around the fire for a communal meal, Ajoke felt a tug at her heart. It was then that she realized how much her food had come to mean to the village. They weren't just coming for the taste, they were coming for the connection, the sense of unity, and the healing they experienced. It wasn't just about the meal itself, but the bond it created among them. There was something special in the way the village would come together and share the dish. It brought people closer, transcending the daily struggles they faced. Ajoke's food had become a symbol of love, unity, and healing. Yet, even with the positive changes it had brought, Ajoke knew that she couldn't keep her secret forever. She felt a growing sense of responsibility, a sense that her secret recipe could serve a larger purpose, something beyond just her own family and village. People began to ask more questions, their curiosity piqued by the mystery surrounding her cooking. They admired her for her culinary skills, but some began to question why she refused to share the recipe. Whispers began to circulate, and slowly, the legend of Ajoke's dish began to spread beyond the village. The day came when a wealthy merchant named Tond, who had heard the stories of Ajoke's food and its magical qualities, arrived in the village. He had traveled from a distant town, eager to learn the secret of her cooking. Tond, who had built a fortune in his travels, offered Ajoke a great sum of money in exchange for the recipe. He promised her wealth, fame, and prosperity in return. But Ajoke, as she had always done, declined, saying that her secret was not for sale. But Tond was persistent, and his charm was powerful. He knew that there was something special about Ajoke's food, something he couldn't explain. He believed that if he could acquire her secret recipe, it would bring him everything he ever wanted. In a moment of weakness, Ajoke agreed to share her recipe with Tond, but only on one condition, that he would respect it, cherish it, and never exploit it for personal gain. Little did Ajoke know, that decision would change everything. As the weeks went by after Tond's visit, the air in Ajoke's home felt different. There was a weight, a palpable tension that she hadn't noticed before. She had always been content with the simple rhythms of life, cooking, raising her children, tending to the land, and participating in the village's communal activities. But now, with the secret of her grandmother's recipe known to someone outside of her family, everything seemed uncertain. Ajoke had always been protective of her secret, understanding its power and significance. It wasn't just about the recipe itself, it was the centuries of wisdom and cultural significance tied to each ingredient. The recipe was more than just a dish, it was a connection to the past, a legacy passed down through generations. Each time she made it, she thought of her grandmother, who had taught her not only the steps of the recipe but also the sacredness behind it. There was magic in the way the spices came together, the way the dish was served, and the energy that radiated from the food once it was shared. But now, the thought of that magic being passed on to a stranger left her feeling unsettled. Tond's promises of prosperity and respect were tempting, but Ajoke couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. She had believed that her decision to share the recipe was made out of goodwill, that perhaps the dish could help others outside her village in ways she had never imagined. But as the days passed, she realized that Tond was no longer the only one seeking the secret. Whispers had begun to spread beyond the village, carried by travelers and merchants who had tasted her food. As the legend of Ajoke's recipe grew, more and more people started asking questions. The quiet, humble woman who had once kept her recipe close to her chest now found herself surrounded by those who saw her gift as something to be exploited. The villagers, too, began to react. Some were excited by the idea of the recipe being shared, eager to experience its magic for themselves. Others were more cautious, understanding the power that came with such a gift. They had seen the positive changes it had brought to their community, and they feared that if it were mass-produced or sold to outsiders, its meaning would be lost. Ajoke's family, too, noticed the shift. Her children, who had grown up eating the food she made with love and reverence, began to question their mother's decision. They knew the power of the dish, but they also saw the subtle changes in her, how she seemed distant, as though something precious had been taken from her. One afternoon, as Ajoke was preparing another batch of the dish for the village feast, her eldest son, Kihind, approached her. He had always been perceptive, quick to notice the smallest of details, and it was no surprise when he asked the question that had been on everyone's mind. "Mother, why did you share the recipe with Tand?" he asked gently. "I thought you said it was a family secret. Why now?" Ajoke paused, her hand still in the middle of stirring the pot. The question caught her off guard, and for a moment, she didn't know how to answer. The truth was, she wasn't sure herself. She had never questioned her decision until now. She looked at her son, seeing the concern in his eyes, and for the first time, she felt the weight of her choice. "I thought that sharing it would help people, Kihind," she said, her voice quiet and filled with uncertainty. Ton promised that he would respect it, that he would use it for good. But now I don't know. I fear I've made a mistake. Kihind took a step closer, his expression softening. "But mother, you've always said that the recipe was not just about the food, it was about the people who would share it. It was a gift from our ancestors, meant to bring people together, to heal. If it's shared the wrong way, it will lose its magic, won't it?" Ajoke's heart sank as her son's words echoed in her mind. He was right. The recipe wasn't meant to be a commodity, it wasn't meant to be something that could be bought or sold. It was meant to be shared with those who understood its true meaning, those who would honor its history. But Tond, and others like him, didn't understand that. To them, it was just a recipe, a means to an end, a way to profit from something they didn't fully comprehend. As Ajoke stood there, she began to realize the extent of the decision she had made. Tond had promised to use the recipe respectfully, but promises were easy to break. The magic of the dish, the essence of what made it so special, could easily be lost if it were mass-produced and sold to the highest bidder. Ajoke felt a deep sense of responsibility to protect her family's legacy, and yet she couldn't help but wonder if it was already too late. The dish was out in the world now, and there was no way to take it back. Kihind's voice broke through her thoughts. "What will you do now, mother?" he asked, his tone more urgent now. Ajoke took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision she had to make. She knew she couldn't undo what had been done, but she could take steps to protect what remained. The first step, she realized, was to speak to Tond. She needed to remind him of the sacredness of the recipe, and she needed to ask him to respect its origins, to stop treating it as something that could be packaged and sold. She would also need to reconnect with her community, the people who had always shared in the magic of the dish. If she was going to reclaim the true essence of the recipe, she had to ensure that it was returned to its rightful place. "I will speak to Tond," Ajoke said, her voice filled with resolve. "I will ask him to stop using the recipe in this way. And I will do everything I can to ensure that our legacy remains intact." Kihind nodded, his face full of pride. "You are wise, mother. I know you will make it right." Ajoke looked down at the pot before her, the dish simmering in the warm light of the evening. It was beautiful, as always, but now it felt like something she had to protect. The recipe was not just a dish, it was a part of her, a part of her ancestors. And no matter what it took, she would fight to preserve its magic and its meaning. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but Ajoke knew that she was ready to face the consequences of her decision and reclaim the secret that had once belonged solely to her family. As the days passed, the air in Ajoke's home grew heavier with uncertainty. The decision to share the secret recipe with Tond had weighed heavily on her heart, and she found herself wondering if she had made a mistake. Her son, Kihind's words echoed in her mind, reminding her of the deeper significance of the dish. The recipe was never meant to be commercialized or used for selfish gain. It had always been a gift, shared with the intention of uniting people, healing hearts, and preserving the culture of our ancestors. But now that it had been revealed, it seemed like the magic had begun to dissipate. The dish, once a symbol of love, warmth, and connection, had become something different in the hands of those who didn't understand its true power. Ton had promised to use the recipe respectfully, but Ajoke couldn't help but feel that his words were empty, that he had no true appreciation for what the dish represented. The thought that it was now being passed around like a mere commodity filled her with dread. The community, too, had begun to feel the ripple effects of Ajoke's decision. People who had once gathered in her home for the shared experience of tasting her cooking now found themselves clamoring to get a taste of the magic behind the recipe. What had been a quiet, intimate act of culinary love had now become a popular trend, with people hoping to catch a glimpse of the recipe's power. Some even tried to replicate it, using their own versions, but the magic was always absent. It wasn't just the ingredients, it was the love, the intention, and the respect for the ancestors that had made the dish so special. Without these elements, the recipe was just another meal. Ajoke's anxiety grew as the days wore on. She hadn't heard from Ton after she had shared the recipe, and the silence made her uneasy. She didn't know whether he was using it in the way he had promised, or if he had already begun exploiting it for his own benefit. It felt like a betrayal, like something sacred had been stolen from her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. One morning, as the sun began to rise over the village, Ajoke sat in her small kitchen, stirring a pot of porridge. She gazed out the window, watching as the villagers went about their daily routines. The quiet hum of the community, the laughter of children, the clink of tools in the fields, all of it seemed so far away from the turmoil she felt inside. She thought about the sacrifices her ancestors had made to preserve the secrets of their culture, and she felt the weight of that responsibility on her shoulders. That was when she heard a knock on the door. It was soft at first, and Ajoke wondered if it was just the wind. But the knock came again, more insistent this time. She stood up and made her way to the door, her heart beating faster. She opened it cautiously, unsure of who might be standing on the other side. To her surprise, it was Ton. "Ajoke," he said with a smile, though his eyes held a certain distance, "I've come to speak with you about the recipe." Ajoke's heart sank. She had hoped for this moment, but now that it had arrived, she wasn't sure she was ready. "Ton," she said, trying to mask the worry in her voice, "what have you done with it?" Ton stepped inside, his presence filling the room. "I've shared it, as I promised. People are flocking to my shop, eager to experience the magic that everyone is talking about. But something isn't right, Ajoke. The recipe, it's not having the same effect. People are eating it, but they aren't feeling the way I thought they would. I thought it would change them, make them better, but it's not working. There's something missing." Ajoke closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a sense of relief mixed with disappointment. She knew exactly what was missing: the heart, the intention, the respect for the recipe's true power. She had tried to explain it to Ton before, but now, seeing the disappointment in his eyes, she realized that he didn't understand the importance of the recipe beyond its surface value. "Ton," she said gently, "the recipe isn't just about the ingredients. It's not about getting rich or gaining popularity. It's about the love and care that goes into it. It's about honoring our ancestors, the spirit of our culture. Without that respect, the magic can't exist." Ton looked down, a look of frustration crossing his face. "I thought I understood, Ajoke. I wanted to help share your gift with the world. But now, I see it's not just a recipe, it's something much deeper. I've made a mistake." Ajoke sighed, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. She knew that Ton's intentions had never been entirely malicious, but they had been misguided. In his eagerness to share the recipe's power with the world, he had overlooked the deeper meaning behind it. "Maybe it's not too late," Ajoke said softly. "Maybe there's still a chance to make it right." Ton looked up, his eyes filled with sincerity. "What do you mean?" "I'm going to take the recipe back," Ajoke replied, her voice steady with resolve. "I'll teach you how to make it again, but this time, it will be with the right intentions. If we are going to share it with the world, we need to understand it first. We need to honor it, and we need to remember why it was passed down in the first place." Ton nodded slowly, the weight of his actions settling on him. He had always respected Ajoke, but now, he understood what she had meant all along. The recipe wasn't just a tool for success, it was a symbol of culture, history, and respect. It couldn't be used for profit, and it couldn't be separated from the love and care that went into creating it. As Ton left Ajoke's home that day, he promised to change his approach. He agreed to work alongside her, learning the true meaning of the recipe. Together, they would begin the process of returning it to its rightful place, within the hearts of those who understood its true power. Ajoke's heart felt lighter as she watched Ton leave. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to make things right. The recipe was more than just a dish, it was a piece of her heritage, a piece of her soul. And no one, not even Ton, could take that away from her. As Ajoke reflected on her decision to reclaim the recipe and restore its true meaning, she couldn't help but feel a mix of hope and anxiety. It was a path she hadn't expected to take, but it was one that had become necessary for the preservation of not just the recipe, but also the integrity of her family's legacy. The very essence of the dish had been shared, but it was clear that the magic had faded when it was used for selfish gain. The recipe needed to return to its roots, to the hands and hearts that understood its deeper significance. Ton, now fully understanding the gravity of his mistake, was ready to make amends. Ajoke had agreed to teach him the true meaning of the recipe, but this wasn't going to be easy. The recipe wasn't just about the ingredients or the steps, it was about intention, respect, and honoring the ancestral wisdom that had been passed down through generations. Ajoke knew that this process would require time and patience, but she was determined to share the depth of her knowledge so the magic of the dish could flourish once again. Over the next several weeks, Ton visited Ajoke regularly. At first, there were awkward silences as they worked together. Ton had grown used to running his business efficiently, focusing on profits, and cutting corners to achieve success. The idea of slow, mindful cooking was a foreign concept to him. But Ajoke remained patient, guiding him step by step, teaching him not just how to prepare the dish, but also how to prepare his heart for the work. She spoke to him about the history of the recipe, about her grandmother's teachings, and about the spiritual connection she felt when preparing the dish. The more she shared, the more Ton began to understand. One evening, after a particularly long day of cooking together, Ton sat down beside Ajoke by the fire. He had watched her prepare the dish with reverence, feeling the weight of the moment, and had begun to see the significance of every motion, every spice, every gesture. "Ajoke," he said softly, "I never understood before. I thought this was just a recipe, something I could use to make money or get ahead. But now, I see it's something so much more. It's a gift, something sacred. I've been selfish, thinking I could just take it for myself without understanding the responsibility that comes with it." Ajoke smiled, her eyes warm as she placed a hand on his. "Ton, it's never too late to learn. The magic is in the heart of the one who prepares it. It's not just the food, but the love and intention behind it. When we honor the recipe, when we prepare it with respect, that's when it works its magic." Ton nodded, his heart heavy with remorse but also lightened by a newfound understanding. He had taken the first steps toward redemption, and now it was time to share this knowledge with the village. The next village feast would be different. Instead of selling the recipe to outsiders, Ton would return to the roots of the dish and prepare it with the community in mind. Ajoke had decided to reveal the full depth of the recipe to the village, but not as a product for profit. She wanted them to understand its true value, to appreciate the story behind it, and to honor the generations that had come before them. It was not a recipe for wealth, it was a recipe for connection, for healing, and for community. As the day of the feast approached, the excitement in the village was palpable. People were eager to experience Ajoke's cooking once again, but this time, they knew it would be different. There were whispers in the air about the magic of the recipe and the new approach Ajoke was taking. Many had heard the rumors of how the dish had changed lives in the past, and they were curious to see if it would have the same effect now that it was being prepared with true intention. On the day of the feast, the village gathered in the open space near the river. The air was filled with the sounds of drums and laughter, and the smell of food wafted through the air. The long wooden tables were adorned with colorful cloths, and the community came together to celebrate the harvest and the bonds they shared. As the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the village, Ajoke and Ton stood side by side, ready to serve the dish. When the food was finally served, there was a moment of silence. People took their first bites, savoring the flavors that had been absent for so long. The dish was everything they remembered and more. There was a richness to it that they hadn't experienced before, something deeper, something that reached into their souls and connected them to the land and their ancestors. It wasn't just a meal, it was a symbol of everything that had brought them together. The magic, the love, the connection, it was all there, just as it had always been. Ajoke stood back and watched as the villagers ate, her heart swelling with pride. She had reclaimed the recipe, and more importantly, she had reclaimed the magic behind it. She knew that it wasn't about wealth or fame, it was about the love and intention that went into the dish, and the way it brought people together. The village had learned that the recipe wasn't something to be hoarded or exploited, it was something to be shared with respect and care. Tund, standing next to Ajoke, smiled as he watched the villagers enjoy the meal. He knew he had learned an important lesson, and he was grateful to Ajoke for teaching him the true meaning of the recipe. It was no longer just about selling a dish, it was about honoring a tradition, respecting the past, and creating something beautiful for the future. As the night wore on and the village continued to celebrate, Ajoke felt a sense of peace that she hadn't known in years. She had made the right decision. The recipe had returned to its rightful place, and it had brought the village closer together. In that moment, Ajoke knew that she had protected her family's legacy and ensured that the magic of the dish would continue for generations to come. In the end, it wasn't just the recipe that had been transformed, it was the people who had tasted it, who had understood its true power, and who had embraced the importance of sharing it with love and respect. Ajoke had not only reclaimed the dish, she had reclaimed the heart of her community. And that, she knew, was the greatest gift of all.